Patrick Daly and welcome to Interlinks. Interlinks is a program about international business and globalization and the effects these have had on our life, our work and our travel over the last 50 years or so. In each program, we interview a person from another country or with strong connections to another country to get their unique perspective on these matters and how they have affected their life, their work and their business. There's a little bit of history, a dash of economics, sprinkling of business, and an overlay of personal experience, both from me and from my interviewees. Today, we will be talking to Frank Kilbride, country manager for Aramex. Frank is a man who started his career in marketing back in the day with the IDA. And I guess he'll explain in due course to us his career up to the point of being country manager for Aramex. Aramex is an international express mail delivery and logistics services company headquartered in Dubai in the Arab Emirates. Began operations in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan in the 1980s. And I guess Frank will explain what the business does here in Ireland. But suffice to say, it's a company of some almost 14,000 employees and active in over 50 countries around the world. So welcome, Frank, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, Patrick. Good to talk to you today and pleasure to be your guest.
So you've a professional career, as I referred to there, stretching back to the early 90s with the IDA. And Aramex. And Frank, could you give us a quick run through of your career to date?
Yeah, sure, Patrick. So as you said, I have a background in marketing and studied as an undergraduate and postgraduate level and went to work with the IDA as the first job out after graduating early 90s. Worked there for a number of years, which was a great experience. Primarily on the working with the Irish companies who were sub-suppliers to American multinationals in the main, but also globally located customers. So we got a great induction into how business is done and, into a great organization, really, really interesting time, quite challenging, as you can imagine, the early 90s at some levels, but a period of great growth that sprung from that and great learning experience for me. I went on then to work with a company called the Clondalkin Group, which at the time were an Irish PLC, primarily in print and packaging. It was on the sales, marketing, business development side with those guys. Again, we worked in a company called Cahill Printers, which those of you from Dublin will remember was on the East Wall Road. And that company worked with, again, a number of multinationals who produced software. And the service we supplied them was manuals, computer equipment manuals in the main. So yeah, that was a different experience, learned a lot. And we went on then to set up a joint venture with a company called Irish Express Cargo. And that company was called EMS. And we put together kits, packs that included software, the manuals, packaging. And we did sub-assemblies for a number of larger customers. So yeah, that was so-called turnkey. Remember back in the day, 3.5-inch floppy disk replication going to CD-ROM replication and kit out and then delivery of those kits to the customers, be it in the US or in Europe.
Was that what became Sercom, Frank?
No, Sercom were actually a precursor to a company called Printec, were the original, if you wish. And then Printec were, I think, acquired by DCC, and as that name was changed then to Sercom. So it was in that same space. They were probably a pioneer in that service in Ireland. BG Turnkey would have been another, Sean Keohane. Sean and the guys in Printec, I think, kind of pioneered that, driven by requirements from Microsoft, from Apple, predominantly. And that whole industry became a real growth area throughout the world, but a lot of that came out of Ireland. And Sean and company very successfully exported the ideas to countries all over the world. So tremendous success, and it was a boom in that type of production because, as you recall, all the software was on discs, it was on CDs, and there was printed manuals with it. So very, very busy time, late 90s, early 2000s for that. So that was the history with that. Then we went on to work with a company called U.A.E at the time. It was a forwarding and logistics company based in North County Dublin. That company has since subsequently been acquired by Aramex. That was the introduction to Aramex. That was around the early 2000s. We basically set up the logistics function in that company, which was warehousing, pick, pack, fulfillment, and again, working with some of the same customers, but also trying to expand that out. And that company had operations in the UK and Ireland. And then I worked in my own business in the mid-2000s for a number of years. before rejoining what was now Aramex in 2008, where I've been working with the PLC since that time as in the role of country manager.
Aramex is a company that started operations back in the 80s in Amman, Jordan, and now headquartered in Dubai. And as I said in the intro, something like 14,000 employees in 50 countries. So what are the core strengths of Aramex internationally and then specifically in Ireland?
Yeah, look, Aramex is an interesting company. You're right. They started in Amman in Jordan back in the early mid-80s and by an entrepreneurial guy called Fadi Gandour. And he basically set up the business to act as an express delivery company for customers in that part of the world initially. And it expanded rapidly over the years. It was one of the first companies from that region that had a NASDAQ listing in the late 90s. Has grown substantially to say there's over 17,000 employees, 98 different nationalities in over 60 countries throughout the world. So yeah, a reasonable sized business, about 1.2 billion, as quoted on the Dubai Stock Exchange, the DFM, Dubai Financial Markets. And that business was a real success story from a very humble beginnings to the entity we just described. And it is known probably best for express parcel services, e-commerce services in different markets throughout the world. But in this particular part of the world, we're a B2B business, and that we service companies that are manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and we work with them to provide service forwarding, logistics, and international distribution. So we have a slightly different focus, but each country operates as its own entity. It's its own profit and loss, responsible for its its own strategy and own successes. So it's quite diversified in one respect in terms of the operating structures. But the system is an interesting one, and it's known as a federal system in Aramex. So it's seen as obviously the word connected to federation, and that each country must operate on its own and successfully and feed into the network wherever possible, the wider network of Aramex companies globally. Yeah, it's been an interesting 12 years, bookended as it is between the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, right through to COVID-19. So, how is coronavirus impacting day-to-day operations at the current time? Yeah, well, look, there'll be three, I suppose, main areas to that, Patrick. I mean, the primary one, obviously, is the staff and our customers. And, to take it from a staff perspective, it's led to a big change for us, as many companies, in that we're operating distributed working practices as best we can. This business relies upon touching the product, handling products. So we deliver it to the final user, the end consumer in many respects. So we're needed to be present and handle products, so that there's no way to have a completely distributed workforce. So we have to stagger our operations in terms of office, but particularly delivery and warehouse. And warehousing and delivery is key elements of what we do. And, that's been a challenge for us to make sure that functions obviously effectively, but also fairly, and that everybody is seen as a part of a team. We are part of a chain, and that team is not just office space, but it's also physical in terms of handling the product and delivering the product. So that's been a challenge for us and for every company, I think, but also for our customers. And there's been wildly different experiences. Some of our customers are simply not able to operate at the moment. As you know, the country is operating in a lockdown effectively. So many of our customers, both delivery and collection points, are closed, particularly one of the products, a road freight product, as we call it. However, to contrast that, we have many customers that are pharmaceutical and food, and those customers are extremely busy, as you can appreciate. We're shipping a lot of product, or assisting them in shipping product to all over the world and into Ireland and out of Ireland. So that's been incredibly busy, very interesting time. So there's a balance. It's a real mix. There's parts of the business very busy, and there's parts of it getting a little quieter. And how have you found the borders to be working, say, on the one hand, inside the EU, and then on the other hand, helping those customers who are maybe sending stuff outside the EU? What's the different experience of how borders are working? Yeah, the intra-EU, if you will, that's working well and has done. There was some initial congestion, crossing through borders as countries became just more familiar with how the processes work. But for heavy goods vehicles, for large vehicular traffic, that's flowing and moving pretty well. Some of the distances, we're moving a lot of product at the moment from southern Italy. That has been a little bit more challenging because you're moving through multiple borders. But by and large, We've seen a slight increase in lead times, but not a real worrying deterioration. So that's worked well. Internationally, yeah, I'd have to say, look, quite good. The main issues is not really a border one. It's more of a port congestion and obviously challenges from an air freight perspective. A lot of the options we and our customers would work with have been closed to us, i.e. passenger craft. There's no availability there. Predominantly, we're using freighter or charter facilities. So that's been a change. From a port perspective, definitely there's been challenges there due to congestion. We're seeing shipping sailings being cancelled, and there's different reasons for that. So definitely challenges there, but it varies really widely between countries. And we're seeing some return to normality in the Chinese ports, but I think there's a long way to run on this thing yet.
Okay. Now, our government has begun to kind of tentatively signal kind of the outline of a gradual exit strategy for later this year. So in terms of yourselves as a business, are you still in your kind of emergency plan, or have you planned your own exit strategy as a business? And in that, what kind of permanent changes do you see in your business sector, and what opportunities might there be in the future?
Yeah, look, our business is very much built around our customer requirements and customer demands, be it production or indeed delivery into other supply chains. So we will follow them, and we will take our lead from those guys. We're a pure service provider. So yes, I think that's always going to be part of what we do. In terms of the overall business, maybe for a moment, we're definitely seeing in terms of the e-commerce and express deliveries challenges there in terms of maybe changes in buyer behavior. While the domestic networks are quite busy, some of the international ones less so. And you're seeing less international shipping from express parcel perspective in different geographies. So that's interesting, and it is having an effect. How I think we will come out of it, I would think we're seeing a build-up in inventory for many customers, a change in purchase behavior, which is impacting how we do business. I think that will continue for a long number of months until supply chains reorganize themselves. I would see some fundamental changes as well as to how we do business and how our customers do business. And I think that will be materialized in increased inventory being held in different locations, a reevaluation of suppliers and who companies are working with, the partnerships. I think all of those will come. Our response to that will be built around really what the customers require. And we hope to be able to offer them an international solution in many cases, be it Middle Eastern, Australasia or US, and that's just the nature of our business.
And this phenomenon of outsourced logistics services, which is a fairly recent innovation, to me it's one of these tangible manifestations of this economic globalization, which is often a topic that we talk about here. But from your perspective, what do you think drove that innovation of outsourced logistics services? And what do you think are the benefits and advantages that it brings to your customers and other businesses who do it with other logistics service providers?
Yeah, sure. I think outsourced logistics is a development that has come about through a reorganization of companies' focus on what they do best and what their core strengths are. So it's back to what's your core business, what are you good at, and what do you really want to concentrate or focus on. And many customers have said that, warehousing and indeed shipping are not core competencies and not something that they want to invest heavily in. And they would be better working with companies whose specialization is that area. And, that is what in the main has driven this. Also, I suppose, freeing up capital. Companies have not wanted to invest in facilities, equipment, handling, that they're really maybe could use elsewhere in terms of factories or retail. So that's probably been the second driver of it. And the third, possibly the most important, has just been fluctuations in demand. The demand forecasting and reaction to demand patterns is a key issue for customers. And holding inventory or indeed warehousing, it can be seen as an expensive exercise. And many companies have decided, well, look, let's move some of the risk away from ourselves and put it to partners who can share that risk among multiple customers, and thereby get a better unit rate for us. And that really has driven it. And yes, you're right. Is it a feature of globalization? Most certainly. It is also, I would say, a focus on specialities, what you're good at. sticking to things that you are effective at. And that's what's driven this.
And then this process of globalization, that maybe that's an element of, it seemed to continue unabated through the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And then after about 2010, the mood kind of started to shift a bit. And particularly since 2015-16, we've seen geopolitical tensions, we've seen rising nationalism, now we have coronavirus, and we also had climate change, which was affecting people's thoughts of globalization and rising costs in Asia and so on. So where do you think we are at this? Where do you anticipate this process is going? Are we stalled? Are we going backwards? Is it a blip? What's your own take on it?
Well, I think what it will do is it will put a necessary and a really much overdue relook at the whole supply chain process. And I hope it comes from both consumption, i.e. you and I, what we consume, how we consume it, but right the way through to production. And I think it'll be driven by two things. I think the individual consumer will have a big impact on this, because I suspect, and this is tied in with environmental concerns, but also there are broader societal issues as well, that there may be a rethinking about, the cost to produce items that we take for as everyday, they're not essentials, but as everyday items, be they t-shirts or items of clothing, particularly maybe elements of fast fashion, that there is a massive production cost to those things. Maybe not seen in a dollar price, but certainly in an environmental context and recycling context in a supply chain. So I hope there is a rethink of that, and that's at an individual level. I think broadly speaking, back to at a company level, I think people will rethink their supply chains, and I think there will be a deep look at where goods or how goods travel, where they come from. I call it the supplier network, but how well do manufacturing companies really know their supply network? Yes, they're tier 1 suppliers, but tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers, how well are they known? What sort of relationships are in place? What mapping has been done of that? And also what contingency planning has been done? And this is the ultimate test of options and plans, because we're seeing how reliant we are as an economy, but a global economy, on certain basis for manufacture. And, you have to question whether long-term, whether that is sustainable. And I hope a discussion is brought up around that, because it's important. But I do think companies will look at their supply chains, and I think there might be an examination of where some of that production is done, perhaps looking to a relocation of certain elements of that.
Yeah, been thinking about this a lot in the last number of weeks, and you kind of referred one of the earlier questions to this idea of optimizing inventories, because it ties up working capital, and the operating paradigm for the supply chain has kind of been, reduce inventories to the minimum expression possible to keep the business going. And I wonder whether we're in for a shift of paradigm to one where security of supply trumps inventory optimization. So we're looking at maybe shorter supply chains, more redundancy, more strategic inventory, which means, I guess, more and bigger warehouses, more materials handling, more automation, and so on. What would be your own take on it?
Yeah, look, I think you're right. I would always see it as a tension, and that tension is between meeting consumption patterns, and we have developed an always-on economy, the on-demand delivery, on-demand ordering, and that has led to significant, I suppose, innovation in supply chain practices, but also in modern manufacturing. The lead times involved, and understanding of how those interact with each other. So you're right, that tension has been there. Will it change that perhaps you'll get an acceptance of slightly longer lead times? We're seeing that at the moment. People generally have been pretty accepting of that. You see it when you're ordering stuff online yourself, that most providers are saying, look, due to the current crisis, there will be delays. Most people are accepting of that. So that's a point. I also think that you're right. If you wish to have inventory closer to local markets, the only way to do that is to have bigger warehouses and to have it close to the marketplace. And that has been a tension that has been in place, I think, probably since the early 2000s here, where a lot of materials inventory that was on the island has moved to the UK. We're seeing some of those materials move on to the continent. Will you see a return to perhaps greater amounts of inventory left here? Maybe. But the counter argument to that is the long tail of part numbers and stock keeping units that many customers have, but there's thousands in some cases of part numbers. They can't all be kept locally because it's only economical to do that. And the best way to manage that is to have a central point, and that smaller countries like Ireland feed off that in terms of inbound. And I think that is unavoidable. And the other great tension there is that we have, as a society, have demanded a downward pressure on prices. So we want things cheaper all of the time, and we want it faster. And there is a cost to producing that we all have to recognise. I also think there's a cost to getting things here over vast distances. And those costs probably need to be more accurately reflected in the price that we're ultimately charged. And I do think there'll be a change within that. And I think that companies would fundamentally re-examine some of their supply side decisions to match demand. And that is definitely out of kilter. A couple of companies do it very well. I think people like Zara and Inditex have done it extremely well. But I think for all of us, the rest of us, there's a lot to be learned, and certainly improvements are needed on it.
And this kind of brings us to a question about Ireland. As an island off an island in the Atlantic Ocean, we have benefited greatly over the last 40 years or so from this globalization and location of foreign manufacturers here, logistics, service provision, outsourcing and all of that. Where do you see our success lying in the future? Do you think maybe we need to change strategy or re-examine our strategy as a country?
Well, look, our FDI strategy has been extremely successful as a country, and we've executed that, I think, really, really well. The number of customer companies that are here and that are located in Ireland is testimony to that. But do I think things will change? Yes, I do. I think, look, there's obviously a hiatus now in terms of decisions being taken for FDI for larger manufacturing style decisions, and that will be put on hold, no doubt, for the rest of the year. So we will see a slowdown in that, and I think that's agreed. Do I think the country needs to relook at that? I think there is a general re-examination of our industrial strategy is needed at this stage. I think, you had Whitaker and Culligan. I think there's probably we're at a step point where we do need to rethink what we're doing. I think the software companies, web companies that are here, which is providing a fantastic base, but predominantly in Dublin, which is another issue. But I think that will continue for a variety of reasons. There is the obvious taxation one, which will be addressed by other people, not by ourselves. And I think we need to take a lead hand in that. We definitely have some reputational issues to address, and I think the government needs to do that. That's the first point. The second, I would think, is that we need to refocus on the Dublin-centric nature of some of these investments. And I think the only way of doing that will be sufficient broadband infrastructural changes in terms of transport, access, and a change in incentives for some of these companies. So I think that's certainly an issue, and it has been for a long time. And I do get why a lot of companies want and like Dublin, but there are such fabulous alternatives. And look, we were able to market the west of Ireland in Mayo as a pharma cluster. I think we've shown we can do it. This is not beyond us, and I think we have to really look at that.
At the end of the day, it's not a huge country, and our transport network now is quite good. We can get to most places in 2.5, 3 hours. I think a lot about this as well, that and I do a lot of work both with the multinational sector and our own Irish-owned businesses, and there's quite a gap between them in terms of capacity and professionalism or resources and so on. And I also do work with foreign-owned companies that would be small and medium in other countries. And our Irish companies sometimes struggle to compare or to stand up to those, in peer countries like Belgium or Holland or Denmark or Finland. So what do you think Irish-owned business need to be doing looking at the future? And what might the government do to help them?
Well, look, I think it does go back to the type of supports that are available, and I think again, Enterprise Ireland has done a fabulous job in many sectors. Have been extremely supportive. To me, from my background with SMEs, it really, I think it's about marketing. It's about product development that works for markets that are accessible and that companies should be looking at. The great issue there is time and resource, right? And I think more could be done there. And I think we should be more focused. Certain sectors, or being places like that, do a good job. But I think we need a greater level of investment. And I think that's primarily the biggest challenge. I think there's some really good products. It's just I'm not sure the value proposition has been thought through enough for the different markets. Mm-hmm. You know, the distribution channels, the partnerships, and the networks. And I think, I think that's where the success is going to occur. Because if we don't do that, we really will struggle. It's always been a small local market. I think we've seen it with Brexit. There will be challenges there. So I think we need to look at the markets outside this country, how we tackle them. And it is a question of marketing support, those networks, those distribution entities, and more will have to be done there.
Yeah, it's really diversification and investment, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it really is. And look, it is yes, but I think it's about knowing the markets. And the great challenge, you know this, Patrick, as well, when you're going to different countries, and it's a cultural piece. It's also understanding the network. How does it work? Who are the buying influences? Who are the decision makers? That takes time. Relationships need to be built. You only buy from people you know. We both know this. And that doesn't matter where you are. And that, unfortunately, takes time and takes a lot of effort. And it's quite costly with travel and everything else. But if anything, that I think this crisis has currently shown is that some of the technology has helped us, and has certainly shown it's possible to circumvent some of that. But I still believe in that power of personal relationship. And from some markets, take the Middle East or, Asia, China, that it's absolutely vital that time and effort is invested into it. And it's a big ask for many small companies. Yeah, it's true. Well, as we come into the kind of final stretch of the interview now, maybe we lighten up a bit and maybe change tack slightly. So outside of work, when you're not working in the business or on the business, what kind of things do you like to do in your spare time, hobbies, pastime? I've 3 kids, my wife Jacqueline, so we spend as much time as we can together out and about on the beach. It's activity time with the kids, which is great. I like to be involved in that. Football, horse riding, daughter's involved in Irish dancing. So that's really the first thing I like to do, is spend time at home. I do like to read, listen to music, occasionally play music. So they're the things that really that I like to do when I can. And talking of reading, have you read anything lately that was particularly inspiring that you might want to share or recommend to the listeners? Yeah, well, actually, I'm reading Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which I've really enjoying. It's a really good read, and I recommend that highly. Okay. Basically, it's about type 1 and type 2 thinking. We do things automatically. It's kind of type 1 thinking, but type 2 is the slower, more pronounced. And I suppose it's just about, it's about those two, the interaction between the two. So I'm really enjoying that at the moment. That's interesting. It's almost like the difference between strategy and tactics, the difference between planning and strategy, maybe, the long and the short, the slow and the fast. Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. Yeah, look, absolutely. We're all, tactical in many ways, but yeah, and look, we've read quite a bit of strategy stuff as well. And I suppose, look, that longer term view, always trying to find time to do that, to dedicate it. You're very good at that. You're able to commit periods, blocks of time to just that forward outward thinking and being able to then articulate that. So, we're all in the here and now, right? But it's taking that step back and looking at things in a longer term view. So we're trying to do that with the business more as well. So the music-wise, love music, and I'm listening to a couple of people. The late, great John Bryan, I'm listening to some of his stuff recently. But Jackie and I are big music lovers. We like to get out to gigs and see live music as much as we can. So, where can people find out more about Aramex and the services that you can offer both at home and abroad? Website, social media, so on. Yeah, well, we're on obviously the web at aramex.com. LinkedIn, we have an Aramex page and an Aramex Ireland page, which we need to do a little bit more on, but there is some good information up there. I'll also send you on. We have a landing page, Patrick, which gives information about the current COVID crisis and some of the things we're doing to do to help on that. For companies that might be interested. I'm Frank at Aramex.com. So we're the usual places. So we can hook up with us if you need to on those locations. It'd be great to talk. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Frank. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Keep well, keep safe, and look after yourself and your family. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, best to you and best to all your listeners.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks also to our listeners. And remember that if you would like to find out more about globalization, international business, and how we can help you to formulate and implement business strategies that deliver, please check out my blog and website on albalogistics.com and my book, International Supply Chain Relationships, which can be purchased on Amazon and Google Books. This is Patrick Daly of Alba Consulting. Goodbye, keep safe, keep well until next time.